Morning, guys. So I wanted to talk briefly, I guess, about how I became a single point of failure in my environment. It's kind of a painful story. It's got some ups and downs, but hopefully there will be a happy ending soon. So hi, my name's John Disher. I am Principal DevOps Engineer in the Oracle Data Cloud. I'm primarily responsible for about 1,500 hosts in 4 data centers, plus a variable number of AWS instances, and I run all this all by myself. I'm also a connoisseur of fountain pens. It's just a few, but remember the first part of fixing the problem is admitting that you have one, so don't judge me. I'm an amateur Miata mechanic. I'm frequently found elbow deep in engine grease working on this beautiful car, and sometimes taking it to the track, although never as cool as Jason was. And I was briefly a load balancer. Jen was supposed to mention that, but that's okay. I'll get to that story at the end. I promise I'll get to that at the end. And as I said, I'm a single point of failure. I am the only DevOps engineer in my group. So real quick, how many of you are a single point of failure in your group, or have been a single point of failure in your group, where not necessarily you were starting a new group, but you were in a group greater than 1 and you shrank to 1? Okay, not as many hands as I had expected, which is good, because I actually expected from hearing from other people that this happened more often than it does. So I'd like to tell you a story briefly of how this happened. This didn't happen overnight. It actually happened over the space of about a year. So in November 2012, I joined a small startup called Blue Kai. In fact, next Friday is my 3-year anniversary. I was a third infrastructure engineer. We were managing 450 hosts or so, plus some AWS stuff in 6 data centers. When I started, we had very little automation. We didn't have Chef. We didn't have any centralized authentication. Provisioning hardware took a long time. We had to go manually into our third-party hosting portals to get things like root passwords. So obviously, one of the first things we did was start automating things. 8 months later, Yanette, the person who'd been there the longest, she decided to leave. At the time, we were up to about 800 hosts, and it was just myself and another engineer managing them. We had started putting in Chef for automation, which is good, because otherwise we probably would have gone insane at the time. 3 months later, he decided to leave for various reasons, and we were up to about 1,000 hosts. We had shut down 2 of the older data centers, so it was only 4 data centers, but it was 1,000 hosts plus AWS stuff. And around this time, my IT organization actually took over some tasks like creating LDAP accounts, provisioning VPN, Confluence, Jira, which was good because I literally did not have the cycles for it. This is a screenshot out of our PagerDuty thing, and as you can see, I've been primary on-call for operations since September of 2013, and that makes me a sad panda. Thankfully, we don't send anything there anymore, but yeah, PagerDuty still reminds me every once in a while on my phone, oh, you're on call. I'm like, no, just say no. In the spring of 2014, Oracle announced they were acquiring us. Again, still a single person, but kind of hopeful that I'd get some help from Oracle, from Big Red, up to 1,300 hosts now. And over the next year and a half, the environment basically doubled to 2,400 hosts. This was the height of the machines over the summer of 2015. I took a bunch of time to refresh hardware down, got it down to about 1,000 hosts, and now it's back up to 1,500 hosts. And thankfully, in the last couple of weeks, after some serious heart-to-hearts with my boss, we've actually had phone screen candidates, which is impressive. This is a nice little graph. The blue dots are the number of machines. It keeps going up. The green bars are the number of engineers. It keeps going down. And the yellow bar, which is sadly absent until this past month, shot straight up. So, punctum singulare deficienti. It's Latin for single point of failure. I liked it so much, I put it on my business cards. Apparently nobody in Oracle purchasing took Latin in middle school like I did. So as engineers, we're always on the lookout for single points of failure. We look in hardware. We look for single path network devices, non-redundant disks, clusters of single machines, components only running in one place. We look in software. We look for components that are only running in one place, like we have a nice redundant storage backend, a nice redundant front-end system, but we have some middleware piece of logic that only runs in one place for whatever reason. But we forget wetware. We forget that people are critical path resources too. There's a lot of domain knowledge. For example, if I was to get hit by a bus, nothing would happen anymore because nobody knows where all of the admin stuff is, what all the quirks are in our Chef base roles, all of the quirks of the environment, how the firewall stuff works, how the DNS stuff works, because I literally cannot find anybody to hand this off to. When your org chart looks like this, you have this nice little red box in the middle. That's me, because I'm on fire. I dye my hair blue so you can't tell. So you have to find a way to handle the workload, or like I call it, 15 pounds of ops in a 5-pound sack. Obviously, the first step is automation and tools. You need something to help you provision. When I started at Blue Kai, our provisioning tools were very hacky and fragile. It could literally take me 10 minutes just to provision a single machine because I had to go to our hosting provider's portal to get IP addresses, passwords. We had no unified firewalling. We had something that attempted to do it, but it did it very poorly, so we had lots of access issues. And we were using manually created accounts and SSH key packages. And as part of the Oracle acquisition, we're moving to Oracle Linux 6. We were running on CentOS and Ubuntu before. So now I have to manage kickstart files, Pixie configs. Doing all this manually is literally impossible. Thankfully, now we're using Chef for OS standardization, and for generic security patching. So like when the bash, the Ghost issue came out earlier this year, I can go into Chef and just say install bash, and it installs the latest version of bash everywhere, and now I don't have to worry about it, rather than going to 2,000 machines and manually checking versions. We're using Chef to push out things like LDAP config, firewalls, internal DNS, all these things that normally a human would interact with, but I can automate it, and it just happens when we build machines. So this is a picture of, I believe this is a picture from the hardware refresh earlier this year. I have 3 displays, and that's 22 Chef bootstraps running in parallel. Each of those windows is like a bash for loop with probably 7 or 10 hosts. So I was building about 200 hosts at a time. When I first started, if we had to build 200 hosts, I think the last time we tried that, it took us 4 days across the 3 of us. I can do it in about 3 hours by myself. This was actually this past Thursday. I was building some additional capacity. That's 10 Chef bootstraps running in one window. I timed it mostly for the talk. It took just over an hour to go from bare metal with no OS to an OS installed, Chef bootstrapped, and the application in production, all by myself. And if you look really carefully, there's a couple of Chef failures that I need to talk to somebody about, so I'll file a ticket after the talk. Afterwards, after the Chef bootstrap, I'll use a really cool tool called CSSHX. It's a SSH multiplexer for the Mac. There are similar tools for Windows and Linux. It lets me open between 20 and 40 terminals per window and send the same command to every one. So if I have finishing steps that I need to manually run, I can fire it up on all 3 displays and generally do about 120 hosts at a time. And like I said, hostile hosting portals. AWS is relatively good in that it forces SSH keys to instances, but when you're dealing with bare metal providers like SoftLayer or Rackspace, you may have to go into a portal to get a root password because your security may restrict you from doing things like installing SSH keys on freshly installed boxes. Or you may be installing your own OS for whatever reason. I timed it the other day. It took me 42 seconds with 7 clicks and a 1 very slow search to get the public and private IP address and the root password out of our provider's portal. I've written some CLI tools that use their API. If the cache isn't primed, it takes 20 seconds, and if there is a cache, it's less than half a second. So obviously that helps me parallelize things and get stuff done a lot faster. And then you have access control. One of the big changes I made was we pushed out LDAP and LPK, which is a patch to LDAP and to OpenSSH that lets you put your public keys in LDAP. So now instead of having users with manually created accounts and SSH key packages that fall out of date, we push their keys into LDAP, and as soon as an account is created, they have access wherever they need using groups for management. So I did some screenshots of some tools. So we have a new machine. Apparently the API was running really good, so I deleted the cache, and I said, get me the info for this machine. And it returns the host, the 2 IP addresses, and the root password, and it took 9 seconds. If the cache is primed, like I said, it takes less than half a second. So then I can use the other tools that I've written, like set the install image to Oracle Linux 6, and then reboot the machine. You can see it does a couple of web calls, it sets the image, gets the server ID, and about 2 minutes later, it starts installing Oracle Linux after Pixie installs. About 8 minutes later, the OS is finished, and there you have an Oracle Linux box built. Like I said, when I started, this could take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour and a half just to get to this step by myself. And then when we're tearing machines down, I have an OS image for DBAN. Security, of course, wants us to securely destroy drives, and since I can't go to the data center, hit them with a hammer, DBAN is the next best thing. Again, set the image, restart it, and about 3 minutes later, it starts blowing up the disk. When I need to return tons of machines, I again have another script, talks to the portal, gets a range of hosts, gets all their IDs, and then starts issuing cancel commands. But there are downsides to all this automation. There really is. Just because you're physically able to do all of this work by yourself doesn't mean you should. It took me a really long time to figure this out. I just kept automating and adding tools just to keep up with things. But it's only created breathing room. It's not an excuse for them to not hire you more people and find you more help. Unfortunately, at least I think as an industry, we build these tools for automation to make our lives easier, but then people think, oh, well, they've created Slack, so now we can give them more work. We can do more stuff with less people. And that's true to a point, but at a point, you still have to add more people. So you have to find ways to remediate this. And the best way is to learn to say no. No is a very powerful word. And you have to learn to say no. Say, I'm sorry, there's too much on my plate. I can't do more. You have to push back somehow. You have to remember, this is not you. You are not Atlas holding up the weight of the world and the weight of the company on your shoulders. And it took me a really long time to realize this. You have to leave your work behind on Friday. A lot of us, we check our phones constantly. I can tell there are people checking their email right now, checking their phones right now. It's Saturday. We're at a conference. Like I told my boss, I'm taking Thursday off. I'll see you guys on Monday. Every Friday, 5:01 p.m., I go in and turn off the mail and the calendar in my phone. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to see it. I don't turn it back on until Sunday night. I don't want to get caught up in email threads all weekend. I've done that before. My 5-year-old daughter doesn't like it when I ignore her. She would rather I pay attention to her than to the email. You have to find community support. Community support is really big in your personal survival. Coffee ops is a great thing. Has definitely saved me a lot. If you're not a fan of coffee, there's also beer ops. I hear that engineers like beer. Find some friends, have some beer, talk some shop, but don't talk too much. Find a users group, go to a conference. It can be a bowling club, a knitting club, play video games, but whatever it is, find something that isn't work. And take your vacations. Now, we're really bad in this industry. We don't take vacations. We do a lot of work. We put off vacations. And it's not necessarily that I say this, not necessarily because I don't want you to burn out, although I don't. I learned from a very wise person that we put off vacations and trips and fun things because we're afraid everything's going to blow up while we're gone. That's too damn bad. If you're such a linchpin in the system that you can't go see your brother-in-law get married, then that's a warning sign to management that they need to hire more people. You shouldn't be missing these things. You shouldn't be missing out on these life events because you're too worried that production is going to blow up. Tough shit. Production blows up. I still want to see my brother-in-law get married. And of course, at the end, hire more people. Because it's completely easy, right? It's totally easy to hire more people. If it was easy, I wouldn't be here. The first step to growing your team is asking for headcount. And I recommend you come armed with data. Keep track of how many tickets you go through. Keep track of your emergencies. Walk-up interrupts are really big. It's something I don't think we think about enough. Keep track of your estimated versus actual time to complete projects, and not necessarily the estimate you gave them assuming that you're drowning, but the estimate that a reasonable person would take to do blah versus the actual time it took you to do blah. And when there's a giant disparity, maybe it's because there were too many emergencies or too many walk-ups. At my last gig, I mocked all this data up, and my manager had us keep track of this for about a month. How much time you spend on projects, how much time you spend doing administrivia, like email, meetings, and very specifically, walk-up interrupts. How many of you can get interrupted when you're dead in the middle of something and then get right back to it after the interrupt is over? Yeah, no hands. 15 minutes, is that about how long? Maybe 30 minutes to get back in the groove? Every time somebody walks up and says, I need help with this, You're super focused on a project. All of that focus is gone. The stack is cleared. The cache is flushed. Everything you had balanced in your head is gone. It'll take you at least 10 minutes, if not 15, 20, 30 minutes to get back to that point. We were specifically doing this because we were doing a lot of IT work, and we were trying to get away from that, so we were keeping track of like IT requests. But I think that keeping track of, like, if you have emergencies all the time, clearly you need more people, maybe this becomes a software side issue, maybe this becomes an infrastructure issue. If you're spending a ton of time in meetings, maybe it becomes a review of, are these meetings useful? If you're getting walk-up interrupts, maybe there needs to be a policy that everything is a ticket. And really, at the end of the day, if you're not getting anything done because everything else happens, then you can use this data, you can be armed with this data to get something to change. If you can't ask for headcount or you can't fill the headcount, you can start looking at delegation and enablement. I have several engineers in my group that have like admin access to Chef, admin access to the LDAP portal, owner access to our Git repos, where they don't necessarily need to file merge requests to make a change, but they do anyway because they're methodical and they want to make sure they do it right. But these are people I trust. I know that I have given them the literal keys to the kingdom, and that if they screw up, everything will go boom. So far, they haven't let me down. So if you can find somebody like that, that's a big help. You kind of push some of that load off like our IT group did before. These are things that I trust them with. They're relatively simple. They run with that, and that's now not on your plate anymore. You can also look at enlisting and poaching. Like if there's a software guy in your group or a QA guy in your team that, for whatever reason, decides ops sounds fun, likes the idea of not going on a vacation and staying up all night, but if they think it's interesting work, give it a go. Give them a chance. If you find somebody internal to the company, it's a better fit, or it's a quicker fit than hiring somebody externally because hopefully they're closer to being ramped up, much less ramp up time. And if all else fails, you go on an interview and you find another job. I noticed that as of yesterday, there was a lot of people hiring and nobody looking. So maybe if you're in this very unfortunate situation, you talk to one of these very fine folks. Maybe this one right here that might be me. Also, shout out to the guys who have artistic skills. I'm really jealous. The Apple one and the SendGrid one, really pretty. So shout out to you guys. So anyway, Jen was supposed to introduce me, and I did mention a load balancer. So the Friday before Christmas in 2013, I was sitting in a conference call at my desk, and I realized I couldn't sit up straight anymore because my neck hurt really bad. And I've pinched nerves in my neck before and strained muscles in my back before, so I went to urgent care, and they gave me some Vicodin and some muscle relaxants, said go home over the weekend, sleep it off. Okay. Over the weekend, I lost the ability to walk straight, and I couldn't hold anything in my right hand. Monday, I went back to the ER. They did a full spinal MRI, and it turns out that I had 2 discs in my C-spine, 5, 6, and 6, 7, right here, that had literally exploded. That was the words a neurologist used. He said it looked like somebody had set off an explosive. And he said that usually this happens due to trauma. I hadn't hit my head, hadn't fallen over. Nobody hit me with a lead pipe. Or an infection, and there wasn't one. So they had to do emergency spinal surgery on Christmas Day to repair the defect. And he and I talked a lot about this, and he said that because there was no trauma and there was no infection, the only realistic cause was probably work stress. I had literally caused my body to explode on itself because I had been working so hard. Now the reason this is funny, and Jen was supposed to introduce me by asking me what my IP address is. So if any of you follow Jenny Lawson, the bloggess, on Twitter a couple of days ago, she asked for people to post embarrassing situations. I posted that 2 years ago when I had spinal surgery, I woke up in recovery literally shouting, "What is my IP address?" I was trying to be a human DHCP client. I thought I was a network device. The nurses had to sedate me again before I could gain the wits to know that I was not, in fact, a Citrix NetScaler looking for my IP address. So I encourage you, if you are in the situation where I am, or you know people who are in the situation where I am, where they are solo engineers who are holding the weight of the world on their shoulders, find help, do what you can, and if you have to, get out. Thank you.